G'day, it's your old mate Matthew here. Welcome to the Yarnsman podcast. In this episode, we have Aaron Webb, manager of the Crusaders. Really found this one interesting. There's a lot to take away, but the whole idea of taking the emotion of the game or the result out and finding out how he can help his people be better, which he can apply that to all aspects of life. That and really the Crusaders culture of physical and mental connection, the fist bump and walking the floor and asking specific questions. But yeah, hope you enjoy the yarn. There is a bit of a trigger warning as we do touch on suicide. Feel free to check out our website for any support resources. Hello and welcome to the Yarnsman podcast. Today we have Aaron Webb. Well, actually I'm in Aaron's place of work. How you going, Aaron?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Matthew. Really good. I'm excited to be here, actually.
Well, thanks for having me. Aaron is a husband, a father, and he is the manager of the Crusaders.
Yeah. I'm not sure which one of those is the biggest responsibility, to be fair, but I'd have to say parenting.
Well, I mean, you're a parent of a wider community. Is that probably the better way of putting it?
Yeah. I've got one of my own children, but many foster children in the rugby environment. That's for sure. Yeah.
What have you struggled with in the last week?
Actually, I had a pretty tough outing up in Hamilton on the weekend in terms of the game, and then I'm still learning my role. I've only been in the role for a couple of months now, and trying to make sure I've got my processes right on the day, and had a little faux pas on match day, so I really struggled to kind of put it to bed for 36 hours, and overthought it and probably overanalyzed myself, and so that's probably what I've struggled with in the last week.
Do you have a chance to kind of process that, share that with the team?
Not really, but I've been able to share it with a couple of key people within the team, because circumstantial, we've gone off on a bye this week, and so most of the team are away, so it kind of all happened, and then everyone smoke bombed and are out of here. So normally I would, but this week I haven't, so that's probably elongated it a little bit for me, but I also know, I'm old enough to know now that I've got a few key people that I can go to and say, hey, look, this is what happened. What do you think? This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And they've been really good. They kind of centered me, because I'd probably gone way out to the right or the left, and they sort of centered me back in there. And actually at the end of the day, it's not a big deal, but at the time it felt like a big deal.
How do you manage the emotional roller coaster that is your role in being involved?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think it's a great question you ask, because we live week to week. If you win one week, you feel great, and if you lose the next week, you don't feel great. And we've had that roller coaster already this season. But what I try to always come back to is the people. And so take the emotion of the game and the result out of it, always come back to the people. How are we influencing and helping our people be better? That's what I always come back to. And that pretty quickly, within 3-4 hours of the end of the result, you probably come, your pendulum swung back to the middle somewhere, and you're sitting a bit more in neutral space than you're either ecstatic or depressed. So, that's how I do it. Well,
I'm sure you probably give off quite a calm, still look, right?
Try to.
Yeah, try to. You look like you would. Looking ahead to next week, what's something you want to work
on? For me, personally, I think there's a couple of little learnings I took out of last week that I want to implement them into my process of managing the players and the team during the week. So that's one thing for me. The other one is actually, this is going to probably sound a little bit weird, but I just want to enjoy the week, because I haven't really enjoyed a week yet, because I've just been so focused on doing. And I want to kind of get my head up and look around, and I've been to two matches, and I haven't even, people talk to me about the crowd, and I said, I couldn't even tell you how many people were there, wouldn't have a clue, because I was so focused on nailing my role. And my boss actually said to me, I had a conversation with him yesterday, he's a really good support person, and he said, you're a perfectionist, you're trying to get everything right. He goes, you're never going to get it right, so stop trying to.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really good piece of advice. So that's probably the other thing I want to try and focus on in this next week.
I heard someone say something around when we're stressed or when we're trying to perform, we default to our standard system, not our expectations.
Yes.
So
Totally.
Perhaps there's something in there about being kind to yourself while you get those new systems in place, right?
Yeah, it is. And, another colleague of mine said, I was talking to her about it yesterday, and she said, well, you're going to make those mistakes and you've got to be able to sit with it, let it go, finish what you have to do, come back and review it, learn from it, and then move on. And I was like, yep. And, I'm deep in the learning pit at the moment, and I haven't been in that learning pit for 10 years because I was really comfortable in the role I was doing here, and you forget what it's like to be down there if you haven't been there for a while. And so just taking the time to kind of acknowledge that that's where I am, and everything's going to be okay because I'm going to build strategies and figure out how to get out of the bottom of the pit and get halfway up the wall, kind of thing.
Yeah, so, go on the journey. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And once you do that and you breathe and you kind of just let it sit with you for a little while, you realise it's not as disastrous as you thought it was at the time.
Yeah. What are you proud of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, what I'm most proud of is my ability to build relationships with people and then those be beneficial for both of us. So, if I can help someone else understand themselves a bit more or grow themselves, that's really good. But I always get something in return from that as well. And that helps me be better or helps me be more self-aware. I feel like relationship building is a really important part of life and something I'm relatively proud of what I've managed to get to. I still can be better, of course, we all can be, but I do believe it's a strength of mine at the moment.
Cool, we can dive into that a bit more in a minute.
Cool.
What gives you hope?
I think the sun comes up every day. That gives me hope. Life for me is every day is an opportunity. And maybe that's just the mindset I have, but I think, you wake up in the morning and you get up and you see the sun and you see your family and you go to work or whatever it is you do in your day to day, and every person you meet, there's opportunity, and whether that's growth or learning from them or just hearing something exciting that they've done or something new that you've never heard of. Actually, I had a really good learning. I'll share it with you the other day that someone said to me about a club sandwich, and I said, oh yeah. And then they said, do you know what club sandwich stands for? And I was like, no idea. And they explained that it was, now I've forgotten what it is, but it's an acronym for something, and I had no idea. And I was like, you know what? Today has been an awesome day because I've learned something, and now I have to go back and research it again. But everything's an opportunity, and that's what gives me hope, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Wanted to dive into your background, so and the road to Rugby Park. You started out as a teacher, yeah?
Yeah, I was an outdoor education teacher or / instructor. So I instructed for a lot of years, and that probably gave me a lot of my people skills and my relationship building, because you're putting people in pretty precarious positions and high in trees and on wires and stuff, and you learn a lot about how people operate. And then I moved into what we called alternative education teaching. So that was working with really highly at-risk kids who came from some pretty diverse backgrounds, but also some really challenging backgrounds, where they didn't have great family support or no family support. Their role models had all, generations had been in prison and all sorts of different stuff. So, and I did that for 5 years, and while it was extremely challenging, it's obviously pretty rewarding at the same time. But man, you learn so much about yourself as a human being. Way more about myself in those 5 years than I have in the other 50 or 48 years I've lived. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through those sort of years, what did you find was something around getting people to trust in vulnerability. If you've got people up on high ropes or you've got high risk youth, how did you get to that as quickly as possible?
I think this is my personal opinion. I just believe it's investment of time in them, and making an effort to just learn about those people. So even when they're on a high, if they're up on a high ropes course, you'll have put a bit of time into them on the ground and working with them and getting them to understand the process that you're going to go through, but also conversation about them and who they are. And once you start asking them questions about themselves, they start to look at you differently, and this person might actually care about me. And especially with highly at-risk kids, they don't feel loved. That's pretty much what it is, in a nutshell. So taking the time and making the effort to care. And there were some things that we would do, like I would go off and go to the kids' sport on a Saturday. Not no teachers, but a lot of teachers would never do that. And so when the kids see you turn up to their sport, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I go, "Well, I just wanted to come and see you play." "Oh, but it's Saturday. We're not at school." "No, I know that." So then, and I believe that's what really starts to build that trust factor. And then they come to you with, if they're struggling and you're willing to listen. You might not have any answers for them, but you're willing to listen. Then they'll open up a bit more, and then the odd time you might have an answer. You might have some, or you can push them to someone who can help them. More equipped to help them than I am.
It just being a positive male role model to these people, that must be hugely beneficial to them, right?
Yeah, it is. And I was so lucky. I worked with a guy, another teacher called Shane Thrower, and he'd had a really serious bike accident and had a brain injury. But what that guy did and the relationships he built with the kids was phenomenal, and I learnt so much off him. And he was just a really good, positive male role model for them. He exercised, he looked after his body after his brain injury, slept 2 hours every afternoon in the late afternoon, because he couldn't function properly if he didn't. He ate relatively well, but he was just really positive about everything, and so when the kids turned up and they'd had a really rough time at home the night before, he'd welcome them in, he'd give them a hug, he'd be just going, "Okay, we're doing this," and he was just really positive and infectious, and kind of felt like that was a huge, not a reverse for me, not a U-turn, but definitely diverged off down and followed him and his example. And I kind of thought a lot about that while we were teaching together, and thinking, well, if I'm doing that and the kids are doing that, then hopefully one day kids will do that with me, and I'll be that positive male role model for them too.
Yeah, that's great. It's sort of when we look at some people taking, the guy there post a motorbike accident and whatnot. Some people are just incredibly positive no matter what happens to them at life.
Yes.
Whether it's other people are just, it's the world is against them and not. We need more positive people to kind of rub off on people, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I didn't know Shane before his accident, so I couldn't tell you if he was that or not, but certainly post-accident, and he rebuilt his life. He couldn't speak or walk after his accident for a long time, but he retrained to become a teacher, and all these things that he did that these kids saw that he'd done, and it was life-changing for some of those young people to see him. And he would always, and this is why I loved the connection with yourself, is he would always yarn to them about his journey. So it wasn't like this thing that sat over there and he wouldn't talk about it. He talked them through everything and was really graphic with them on what happened to him and how his mindset was at different times. And I just thought that's what being a positive male role model is all about.
During your teaching, you had experiences with the things we're trying to avoid. Do you want to share anything around that?
Sadly, we had a couple of young people take their lives, which was horrendous for them and their whānau and all of their friends and the people around them. But one of the things we talked a lot to the kids about is how do we learn from this, and how do we how do we as the people left behind be better and I guess honour their legacy. And we did a lot of work on just trying to get people to talk. Didn't matter who you talked to, as long as you found someone you were comfortable with, that you could share whatever was going on in your life. And again, I guess if you circle back to what I said about building trust before, that's how we operated. We had a sofa in our office, in our teacher's office, and the kids would just come in and sit on the sofa and just talk to us. And having the ability to do that, because at normal school you don't have the ability to do that, or very rarely. Or someone in their lives that they could share a problem with, because as we know, as soon as you share it, it takes a massive weight off your shoulders.
I do believe in the problem shared as a problem shared a problem halved.
Yeah, 100%, and I do too. And then if you share it with 3 or 4 people, it's there's only a quarter of it left.
Yeah.
And so and our kids were pretty stoic type of kids, and so it was a real challenge to get them to open up. But again, it's just time and building trust, and it's no different here in the rugby environment. They're pretty stoic kind of guys, and they're in a really competitive environment, but they've got just as many issues as the rest of us have, or maybe some more, with the pressure that they're under day to day. And by just being able to talk, sometimes it just makes a huge difference. And as you know, and I know, because we've had the benefit of time, for young people, often when they talk to each other, they realise that other people are feeling the exact same things, or the same insecurities, or the same pressure, and they thought it was just them, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, great, you feel that way. And I had a good example of that on the weekend in this little faux pas that I had, and one of the guys said to me, he goes, done the same thing myself, almost identical, and I was like, oh, okay, It's not just me.
I saw a good picture the other day, which was a whole lot of people with thought bubbles that were all connected. And now I'm the only one that feels this.
Yeah. That's a great visual for it. And it's so true. If we live in our own little world, then we think everything is happening only to us. Whereas as soon as we start talking, and even, you and I talking now, we know that we've shared some experiences, or we've had the same kind of insecurities or doubts, self-doubt, and all of those kind of things, because everyone has it. Even our best All Blacks here, they doubt themselves, and people probably look at them from the outside and think they're superhuman, but they're not. They're just like the rest of us.
So what was the road from education to here? And it was the development team, wasn't
it? Yeah. I ran the academy for 11 years before coming into the team, but I think for me it was I've always loved rugby, and team sport from my point of view is a really critical factor of being able to share and have yarns with your mates, and sometimes just talk a lot of rubbish, but at least we're talking, and then just a perfect collision of opportunity, I guess, and experience on my behalf. I managed to get an interview for the role, and I sold myself as a person, not a rugby person, but a people person, and a person who specialises in working with young teenagers and getting the best out of them. And they bought it. And the rest is history. I came in the first year, I would have been hopeless. I was shambles, because I was still trying to understand the rugby system and all of that. And I'd coached, and so I know the game pretty well, but then, hopefully, I believe things started to flourish from there, and we started to get really good outcomes with our players on the rugby field, but more importantly off the rugby field. And if they're doing really well off the field, then their rugby's always going to get better. But if they're off field, if they're struggling, or the self-doubt is there, or they've got other mental health stuff going on, then they're not clear enough to play any sport well, let alone rugby, because it's such a fast-moving, fast-paced game. So, the organisation had always had that probably latent kind of understanding of it, but I probably just brought a more in your face view of it, because that's my experience and that's where I've been.
What was the things you bought? Did you bring the couch into your office?
Yep, got a couch in there, absolutely. That was number one.
I hope you weren't sleeping on the couch.
I may as well have been sometimes. That was number one. But the other stuff is what I've already talked about, but it's investing time in our people and investing conversations in them away from rugby, so around their work, their family, their partner, their studies, whatever it is that they're doing, is actually having those conversations, building a bit of trust. And when you know there's something wrong, just getting to them and saying, hey, are you okay? And, it's easy to say yes, but, for a young person to say yes to you, but if I linger around and they've said yes and then they realise I'm standing there for a reason, they'll often go, well, actually, no.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah. This is the thing that I always just. Are you okay? Is quite an aggressive question.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and the response is well, and almost like what, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is, and we probably could be better in that space, I think, as well. But it's just trying to open that door, just crack that door a little bit, so they feel like they can let something out. And that's kind of the analogy I always have in my mind. If the door's open an inch wide, something can come out of that door, whereas if it's slammed shut, then nothing's coming out. And then, if something pushes out that inch, then the door, maybe the wind blows the door a bit more, further open, and then more comes out. And we see it all the time here, is it'll start with something little and it'll cascade into something. You eventually get to the real point. That's the issue underneath all of that stuff. But often for us here, it's firstly selection or non-selection.
Well,
to the point.
That was going to be one of my questions. Is around that selection. Are you looking for a gap? How wide the doors open?
Yeah, sometimes, because sometimes force is not the right word, but you need to create a place where that conversation can happen. Mm-hmm. And again, if I think about the physical place, for me, it's a side-by-side conversation, and it always has physically been side-by-side. So whether that's in a vehicle, or if we're sitting, so when I do game reviews and have conversations with the players, I know you and I are sitting opposite each other now, but I would always sit beside them. And they almost start to get up and move when you come and sit beside them, because why is he sitting beside me? But especially with the males, because it just completely takes the conflict out. And
this is men talk best side by side. I always joke about where's the best place to have a yarn side by side, or standing at the urinal, but
100%.
Yeah,
exactly. But it's true, because we don't have to look at each other, so you avoid that awkward eye contact. You could be talking to the window and I could be talking to the wall, but we're talking to each other at the same time.
Do you find any form of, I'm going to say, physical exercise or something extreme before having those chats helps, or is it just that you've built the culture to be able to do it?
I feel like we've built the culture well enough to just be able to have those conversations. I think there's always skillful conversation, right? Like you have to, sometimes you can just go in and have a conversation and it works and you go, okay, that was great. You don't have to think about it. And there's other times where I'll really think hard about where I'm going to go and what tactics I'm going to use. And generally they'll be your kids that are a bit tougher, or your people that are a bit tougher to get anything out of. And you also got to be prepared to fail. I think it's really important. Like, it's something that I talk to the players about all the time with the rugby side of things. But myself, I need to be prepared to go and have a conversation, and it might not work out. And it's not the end of the world, because I'll go back the next day and try a different tactic. But be prepared to, to go, well, that didn't work. Okay, what could I do differently? Is it someone else? Is it a conversation that someone else needs to have with that person because I'm not the right person? And, I think that's another area that we're big on in here, is not having that ego of it being, I've got to do this, I've got to solve this person's problem, or I've got to help this person. Actually, what about Matthew? He's actually got a better relationship with James, so let's get him in the room and you guys go and have a conversation and see where you can get to, kind of thing.
So, obviously, connection is a big thing for the Crusaders. Is there a process in getting, you're obviously living and breathing and well experienced in this, but how do you get the players to connect with each other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's massive for us, and one of the things we have on a day-to-day basis, and there's one outside the window there now, but whenever we see each other for the first time every day, we just fist pump each other. And it seems like people walk in here and probably think, what are they up to? But for us, that's a physical connection, and you can't just fist pump someone and then look away. You've got to be look them in the eye, and you actually make a little physical and a mental connection at the same time. And then it becomes more about your mindset and your day to day of how you are willing to connect and how far you're willing to go. And a big part of what I try to do is, and I learnt this off Razor, was he calls it walking the floor, and just going and saying hi to everyone, but having one question in your head for each person when you get to them is, what have you been up to this morning, or how's your family, or how's your daughter, or your wife started a new job last week, how's that going?
A specific question to them.
Yeah, it's a specific question to them. Now that takes a bit of work, because you've got to know your people and you've got to
remember their names.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And invest in them. And we've got around about 80 people in our squad of players plus all of our management. So it's a lot of things to remember. You don't necessarily have to do that every day. You can some days just say hi, but if once a week you can get to each of your people and have that little, it just means a lot to them.
Being seen, being heard, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they've got a voice, like you say. So if I say to you, your wife started a new job, how's that going for you guys? Yeah, and you go, oh, actually, it's really hard because I have to look after the kids. And, then again, there's that problem that's come out, and it's, they've got it off their chest. And now that's not always going to be that easy to get people to speak. But, sometimes these guys, they just want someone to ask them those questions.
Because I suppose having an environment where you can have that, because out in the community they're idolised, people aren't asking how they're feeling, they're talking about the last game or the last performance, right?
Yeah, and to be honest, they don't want to talk about rugby, these guys, when we're talking to them, because we're in it every day, and exactly what you've just said, if you see fans, and it's awesome, the fans are great, but you're getting asked the same questions often over and over and over, so when it's quite refreshing sometimes for someone not to even talk about rugby. And even I find that myself, and I'm only in the management team, but, if I go somewhere and people go, oh yeah, so, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to tell you, because I'm going to have to talk about rugby, and it's, I love rugby, and I've always loved it, and I always will. But right now in my life, there's other things that are critical for my balance, and it's not talking about rugby is one of them.
Well, let's move from rugby to talk about the long run.
Yeah.
How did that all come about?
Well,
perhaps tell us what it is.
Yeah, so the long run is a fundraising event that we started with Child Cancer Foundation to raise funds for the Child Cancer Foundation, and we've got a 1 kilometre perfect 1 kilometre radius around our facility here. So we decided to run it around here, and you can run it, walk it, whatever. It goes for 12 hours. You can come and do 40 minutes or 12 hours, depending on what you want to do. What are we in the end of Feb now? So we did it just over a month ago, and that was our third go at it. But it started from lockdown. I had nothing else to do. I was trying to think of how to motivate the academy players, because we were all, we were training on Zoom because we couldn't see each other.
Officially.
That's right. Yeah. So we were training on Zoom, and we were doing all these crazy things. And I'd run a few marathons in my life, and I thought, I might just, I don't know how long I'm in lockdown for, so I'll train for a marathon and run one at the end of it. And so we did that, or I did that, and then I was like, just before the marathon, about a week out, I was like, I really want to put a bit more something behind this. So I decided, I looked at our charities, our club charities, and the Child Cancer Foundation really stuck out to me, because they'd lost their whole street appeal through COVID and lost a lot of funding. So I said, let's raise some funds for them. So that's what it started from. And then the following year, I turned 50, and I decided I want to do an ultra marathon. So I found one that was 102 Ks, and then trained for 6 months for that, and it got cancelled because of COVID. I was like, I can't let all that training go. So that's when we turned it into the 1K around the block. And so I did 102 laps around here, and it was painful, I tell you, but it was nowhere near as painful, because the whole time I was thinking about what some of these poor kids go through and their families, and that just kept me motivated. And I lost all my toenails and things like that afterwards, but that was a small sacrifice, for what we're able to achieve. And then it just grew from that into this crazy event that we had this year, where we ran 40,000 laps, I think it was, 42,000 laps, 40 or 42, and we raised $235,000. And
it's crazy, right? Well done.
Keep going, and people are doing their PBs, kids are running marathons, and people getting out there doing 60 Ks. They never thought they'd ever be able to do it. It's pretty cool.
I did come down, but I was injured.
Yeah.
Well, have you got any advice for someone training for a half marathon?
Yep. Take 12 weeks of training. Take a 12-week training program, and just get a program you enjoy, and just try and find a good training buddy as well, because that's really helpful, I think, sometimes. Because sometimes we train too hard, or we train too fast, and my version of training is I always want to do one sort of relatively fast run a week, but the rest of them should all be at talking pace. So there's my piece.
There we go. Talking pace. I might just have to talk to myself at the moment, but that's all good. But,
I'll run with you.
No, that's too scary. I don't want to lose toenails. Aaron, mate, fantastic yarn. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and journey and how you're applying that here. I think we can all learn something from that.
Oh, thanks for having me, and it was a real, an honour to be asked to come on here. And yeah, if there's one thing I could just say to all, especially the men out there, is let's just keep talking to each other, because that's how we get better, it's how we solve our issues, and it's how we build better relationships.
Good man, thank you.
No worries.